What is up, everybody? The action's not over quite just yet. Me and Hayden returning for our first semifinal game here at the Portland Regional Championship in the year 2018, just for the history's sake. We're going to be having Adrian Sigler versus Jeremy Shacket. You both just saw them just recently, both coming off pretty successful victories. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here in top 4.
Yeah, so I think really interesting. We get to see more Gardevoir. I think I've only cast Gardevoir so far, and I think it's said that I'll only ever cast Gardevoir.
It's a blessing and a curse.
I think something important Adrian was noting before is that we sort of saw the reveal at the end of Jeremy Shackett's game that his Manectric was slower than Tapu Koko even after megaing. And so I think that's going to affect Adrian's game plan a lot. Like maybe he can play the Tapu Koko a lot more easily. It seems it's pretty important for dealing with the Tapu Fini and the Celesteela, and being able to not get snarled by Manectric before attacking. If you can just get the Manectric to Mega, the Koko's going to be really effective.
I think the nature decision on the Manectric you decided to raise is a pretty interesting one. Normally, I would think that you wanted the fastest Manectric possible just because the primary utility we've seen this weekend is that you want to press Snarl as much as possible. And now you kind of lost that effect against Tapu Koko. You can still hit it with the Snarl, but it's going to be able to get moves off before you do so. And it really changes the dynamic in such a way that favors Tapu Koko.
Yeah, I thought it was neat. Like, it was able to hit a lot harder, and that overheat got rid of the Tapu Koko pretty convincingly.
Yeah, we saw earlier that Amoonguss took an overheat with about 20% left. That might have been a KO in this situation. Team preview actually showing up on our screen from Jeremy. We have the Landorus, Therian, Snorlax, Manectric, Cresselia, Celesteela, and Tapu Fini. While from Adrian, we have the Incineroar, Tapu Koko, Gardevoir, Snorlax, Amoonguss, and Landorus Therian.
Yeah, so I think as we talked about before, Tapu Koko is going to be really important here.
Yeah.
And sort of just how Manectric plays around Tapu Koko, knowing that, well, I'm not faster than Koko, but I do still have Lightning Rod before I Mega Evolve. So probably Manectric's going to be really important. It always will be because it's the Mega, but especially so right now.
One of the interesting little parts, I think, in the dynamics that Tapu Koko and Manectric have created here is that Tapu Koko looks a lot more threatening than usual to Jeremy's team. He kind of, I think, relies a lot more on the Cresselia, which is a pretty safe kind of catch-all defensive trick, especially with this just plethora of speed control options, but you might have to rely on that a bit more here. Maybe not something you mind too much because Snorlax is always a pretty viable win con, but the opposing Snorlax and the Amoonguss make that a bit less reliable.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how Adrian plays around this Snorlax versus River Snorlax. Probably a pretty similar matchup, but he doesn't have to worry about the Persian, which makes things a lot more easy for Adrian Snorlax to sort of be what he plays to. And if we saw before with River versus Quinn that if you set up Trick Room and your Snorlax is set up before your opponent's Snorlax, then you're in a great spot. So it might just be sort of a race to see who gets their Snorlax in proper positioning first.
Right, and the Snorlax kind of mirror match. It's not a perfect mirror, but it's so similar that the speeds of the Snorlax start to become a little scary. I don't know if we've seen any real speed ties yet, but just through the sheer amount of Snorlax we've seen, it feels almost inevitable.
Yeah, I think we do have more tools to work around speed ties still. Like the ally switch on Cresselia was really important. It was sort of how Shacket managed to work around Quinn's sort of. Quinn won the speed tie, but he targeted the wrong Pokemon because of ally switch. And then we've got like a Amoonguss and Incineroar to sort of buy time on Adrian's side.
So from, I believe, Adrian, we have the Incineroar Gardevoir on top, while on the bottom we have Manectric Cresselia from Jeremy.
Yeah, so Adrian's sort of going with the standard lead of Incineroar Gardevoir.
Yeah, so safe.
The two MVPs so far.
Yep.
And then the Manectric Cresselia setting up to sort of just maybe sort of playing into Snorlax, but not wanting to lead it. That would sort of get you into trouble with knockoff and the like.
Yeah.
I suppose it's also possible to play into Pokemon other than Snorlax. It's not the only Pokemon on either team. I think getting Landorus in could be really good, too.
Well, on the other hand there, I think that, I guess the Celesteela is on Jeremy's side, and it looks pretty strong here, especially since it could have provided so much for River previously. We see Manectric get out of there for the Tapu Fini. Once again, not caring about the Incineroar too much. One of its perfect natural counters just through typing alone. Cresselia deciding to stay out there probably changes the speed in some favorable manner. As Gardevoir enters its Mega form, going to be able to fire off those very powerful Hyper Voices. Cresselia and Tapu Fini are both very bulky Pokemon. Might not mind that too much, but the knockoff on Incineroar possibility on the Cresselia could be pretty devastating here, as you do see that hitting the Tapu Fini instead, removing the choice specs once again. It's pretty amusing for me to see that oftentimes Tapu Fini has become sort of the target for this item loss.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like, Shacket not wanting to risk bringing the Snorlax in, and that was good because Adrian sort of called that. But then just Tapu Fini, you always want it in against the Incineroar. And you think that the Gardevoir maybe can't do too much, but then Fini takes so much from Hyper Voice whenever you switch anything in. And Fini, especially, like, even though it's one of these really bulky Pokemon, it still just can't handle the Hyper Voice. And then even though Incineroar is only throwing out resisted attacks, it's still doing some damage. And so if you can get a couple of Hyper Voices off that, Fini's not going to be able to do enough.
And I mean, just look at the damage that Tapu Fini took coming in. The Incineroar actually the slowest thing on the field, able to get off 2 knockoffs, revealing the mental herb there. Oh, Trick actually just stealing an item because your own item was knocked off. Removing the Figgy Berry from that was excellent. You just removed a huge healing option and set up a light screen while doing so.
If he survives the Hyper Voice here, he's going to get the berry back.
Oh, you actually get the reverse Trick Room, giving the speed control to Gardevoir once again. Incineroar very helpful there, creating sort of a sandwich situation.
Wow, so that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I think Adrian can't go for the Hyper Voice now because it will let Fini get its berry back. I thought that was such an interesting play to sort of like go for recovery from Trick and then use light screen in just this really effective way. I think if there is a counterplay to Gardevoir, it's got to have something to do with that light screen.
Oh, totally. I mean, like, very good call. Just the foresight required to go in there in the tournament with it, really. The ally switch, not going to really hamper the Hyper Voice offense, but you see the Psyshock instead because of the light screen, aiming into the Cresselia, but still low enough to pick up the knockout as Incineroar now faces down Tapu Fini. A knockoff still would be pretty effective here because you haven't had the activation, but you might trigger the activation in doing so. Muddy Water not doing a ton, not a 2-hit KO to the Incineroar, but accuracy drop. Nope, the knockoff did not miss. And the berry is gone. Unfortunately, that was a pretty fun little play there with the Trick, but it ended up not coming to fruition.
Yeah, so that's too bad because I guess the reversing Trick Room wasn't exactly what Jeremy was expecting.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of hoping for that Hyper Voice right off the bat. And then he was really scared afterwards with like that maybe a Psychic or a Psyshock with a single target damage would do enough to KO the Fini anyways. And so he had to go for the ally switch to try to get a Muddy Water off. Then the knockoff causing problems.
Manectric returning to the field, not yet in its mega form, so Incineroar at least preserving its attack set for the time being. I think it's really going to be, I hope it's still early enough for those attack drops to matter. Those seem to be generally more helpful early game because it just helps the momentum build up.
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose just at the very end of the game, you can kind of just stack drops if they can't switch. I think the other important note from the previous turn was just that something that will matter in future matches is that Psyshock does actually get reduced by light screen.
Yeah, it does.
So maybe like the next time Jeremy will just have to say, oh, if it's Psyshock and not Psychic, maybe it'll be just weaker enough in terms of base power that I can just risk that Psyshock light screen to activate Berry.
Amoonguss coming in for its partner Incineroar, again, very good against Tapu Fini. You're seeing a lot of the fire, water, grass dynamics here in this tournament today as Manectric enters its own mega form, intimidating 2 special attackers, not mattering too much. Hopefully the combination of Snarl and Light Screen going to be able to give Manectric some longevity here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Manectric just going for the Volt switch onto the Amoonguss slot, actually dealing a little more than I thought it would. Manectric switching out safely, coming in the partner. Celesteela still has the opportunity to do very good things here. As you do, that is the Pokemon that comes out. Not the shiny one, though. I kind of prefer that one after seeing it so often. Misty Seed activation, just like River earlier. So similar set. Hopefully works out a little better for him than it has previously today.
So I think really important note here is that just Manectric's damage on the Amoonguss might indicate that overheat is going to threaten KOs. Either because the Amoonguss maybe isn't bulky especially or just because of that nature on the Manectric.
Right.
And I think with the Steela here, this is much stronger than River's position had been.
Oh, totally.
Because of that different Manectric. And so like this is sort of almost identical to something we've seen before, but it's such a better spot now because Steela has that Misty Seed instead of having lost it. And it's also got that overheat might just KO the Amoonguss.
Oh, I would hope so. I mean, not only does the Volt Switch do enough, but just judging from earlier, overheat in general does pretty large amounts of damage. But I know he can just switch out pretty safely into something like an Incineroar and get that Regenerator health back.
Yeah, so I think we'll have to see sort of that if that revolving door of Amoonguss and Incineroar can sort of recover some positioning here. Adrian definitely has enough Pokemon to recover position, but these are definitely the 2 Pokemon that Jeremy would want to have if he only has 2 left.
I mean, there's just so many options for Adrian. that it becomes pretty easy to like pivot around and build up an eventual spot where you're pretty comfortable. And you see that with the Incineroar returning to the field, hoping to bite into that overheat, not going to be able to hurt it too much. As the overheat does come out, but it does land into the Incineroar slot. There is no berry, but at this point in the game, you don't really mind losing Incineroar. It's kind of done its job. Heavy Slam revealed from the Celesteela. This is actually the first time I've seen it Heavy Slam this week, but not enough to pick up the KO due to that Intimidate. Gardevoir setting up the Trick Room, which is pretty nice considering that Incineroar is very likely the slowest thing on the field here.
Yeah, so Heavy Slam actually being used here is a really important note for games 2 and 3. I think if that had KO'd, this match could have turned out totally differently. Celesteela would have had a Beast Boost. There would have been no Trick Room. Even though Manectric went to -2, Incineroar now has a lower HP. I suppose then Amoonguss Incineroar can still sort of clean up because the Celesteela doesn't have Substitute.
Yeah, probably not.
But at least like something to note going forward is that Heavy Slam did do a lot to Gardevoir. If it's not intimidated, maybe the Celesteela can go for getting rid of Gardevoir, even though it's a little weaker against Incineroar without Sub.
Right. It looks like players are just carefully trying to decide. The Amoonguss looking very strong here if that decides to come out, or whenever it does. The Incineroar just going for the Protect, not trying to apply too much pressure, maybe trying to bait the Protect from the Celesteela, but you're seeing it from the Manectric instead. Celesteela looking pretty free to attack here as it underspeeds, but it goes for the Acrobatics on the Incineroar slot, expecting the Amoonguss to switch in, freeing up Gardevoir to Hyper Voice once more. Celesteela not going to take too much thanks to its natural bulk and everything, but Light Screen being gone is not very helpful for you.
I suppose it's still possible that Celesteela could be slower than the Incineroar, in which case this Acrobatics could very well KO the Incineroar and put the Celesteela in an okay spot. I think with Amoonguss existing, things are going to be pretty tough. But I think Celesteela definitely making Adrian sweat a little bit in what would otherwise be a completely locked up match. I think it's also going to be important to note that Manectric does have a way to do a lot of damage to Amoonguss, but only if it guesses exactly right on the overheat. Like, now that it's a -2, the positioning is so much worse.
Yeah. Celesteela just going for the Protect, not wanting to risk the speed decisions between, but Incineroar just Flare Blitzing the Manectric instead, not really looking at Celesteela as sort of the problem. Both Pokemon able to hang on, but Gardevoir's Hyper Voice is going to be able to remove the dog. Once again, dog whistles exist for a reason, as the sound is just too much for our bud the bear.
It's really interesting to see that Flare Blitz into Manectric. I guess Adrian just thinking, well, I'll just clear the field a little more. Manectric already protected, so
exactly.
Get rid of it.
It was pretty safe an offensive move, because you force Celesteela into a 1v4 where it doesn't look very good that you can win. You can switch out Incineroar pretty much for free and get a fake out Intimidate cycle going.
It's always scary to have a Celesteela as one Pokemon, but
yeah, because it's actually something that has shown that it can handle these situations.
Like if it gets a Defense Beast Boost, things could get hard. But I think you do have to just trust. I have 4 Pokemon. I can definitely work this out.
Acrobatic, that important information there, just because it shows you that Celesteela actually does underspeed the Incineroar, but instead of going for the Incineroar, it goes for the Gardevoir, getting the attack boost, not a defensive boost as is traditional. Flare Blitz going to hit that Celesteela. The damage here actually pretty important, not able to hang on.
Wow, so I guess expecting the Incineroar to maybe play a little differently. If Jeremy had managed to get that KO, things would have been pretty tough for Adrian still, even though I suppose Amoonguss has got to be able to support well enough that maybe that wasn't too important beyond just the information about Celesteela being slow.
And I mean, one of the most devastating parts about that for Jeremy is that we just didn't see the 4th Pokemon from Adrian at all.
I think maybe just the advantage of KOing the Incineroar would have been that you have to see all of the Pokemon.
Right. I mean, normally I would say Snorlax was the safest assumption, and it didn't really have any great spot there, especially against Celesteela. But, you know, it's that the potential for it to be something else is often devastating enough to cause confusion.
Yeah. We also saw the Beast Boost on Celesteela was attack. So we know that you don't have to worry quite as much about the defensive win conditions of that Celesteela. Like if it had gotten a defense boost, it might have been able to win there. But because it's attack, you definitely have to be more scared about, okay, so even if I intimidate it, if I manage to like play carelessly with Amoonguss and lose that, then Gardevoir is again in range of KO.
The adaptation is more important on the side of Jeremy, really. The Celesteela just wasn't enough to carry the game. And Incineroar-Amoonguss combination, again, has just been so oppressive throughout the day that even things that look very nice against Gardevoir are just not cutting it.
Yeah, I think it's really tough to figure out how to break that specific combination. Like, all of the attacks for Amoonguss on this team are very much resisted by Incineroar. Like, you can't overheat safely. I suppose you could, like, Acrobatics would hit both, but then you're worried about the Intimidate plus the Incineroar then being in, and it's faster than Celesteela, we now know. So Celesteela's going to have a lot of trouble, but it's going to have to be really important for victory, unless you want to just go the whole, well, if I don't want to worry about typing, because Incineroar and Amoonguss have good type synergy, maybe I'll just belly jump with Snorlax.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, that's part of what makes it such a good win condition, is that your offensive moves with Snorlax hit a lot of Pokemon for neutral damage, and that's really all you need when you have the ability to take your attack stat to the max the game allows.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we haven't seen Snorlax from Jeremy yet. I wonder if that's going to be his adjustment here, if he's going to try to just adjust playing.
We see the exact same leads, Incineroar Guard and Manectric Cresselia. The Incineroar is still looking a little annoying just because of that knockoff potential, but Manectric does have the power to weaken things quite a bit.
And the Lightning Rod Trace as well, making it pretty tough for Manectric to work effectively.
No, I mean, I have to say the position looks in favor of Adrian.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough for Jeremy to adjust if he brought the same Pokemon, but maybe if he has more of a game plan and is trying to work on how to maybe set Snorlax up in Trick Room, he might be able to work around. It's going to be difficult because you can't Volt Switch anymore safely. Like, you could kind of just assume that Gardevoir is going to Mega Evolve and still Volt Switch, but it's just so much riskier than it should be otherwise.
Right.
And then you've got that free knockoff on Cresselia, and nothing really wants to come in on a knockoff.
No, knockoff is just very oppressive, especially when you consider that Snorlax is a Pokemon that has a lot of reliance on its item. If you actually decided that was your win condition, it's not something you can freely throw in.
Yeah, so we'll have to see what Jeremy can do here.
Manectric getting out of there, going for the Tapu Fini. While it doesn't care too much about Incineroar's offense, we've seen before that knockoff and even the Hyper Voices can wear it down before it even gets to really do anything. Cresselia also switching. Ooh, that's like, while it works out in that you have a Tapu Fini and Celesteela, two Pokemon that kind of counter the crisscross counters here. Just the free turn for Adrian can really matter, especially on turn one, where now you just have all this freedom to act. Gardevoir going to fire off what is likely a Hyper Voice as it enters its Mega State. Well, Incineroar not going for the Fake Out, I believe. Yep, just raw Hyper Voice. You're going to see some raw damage output from the Incineroar. Tapu Fini taking decent damage, while Celesteela takes nothing. Switching into the knockoff, hopefully. No, hits the Tapu Fini, removing the choice specs.
Yeah, so there was, Jeremy had this elaborate play of, well, Hayden thinks that I can't take a knockoff, but I'm sure I can. And so he switched in the Celesteela, got the Misty Seed up so that he could probably take it, but then the targeting went into the Fini instead. And so once again, we have this position of Fini should be safe to switch in, but it just takes too much from Hyper Voice, and then if it gets knocked off, it can no longer threaten the Incineroar.
And one of the problems with a pivot like that is, even though these Pokemon work well individually to counter Incineroar and Celesteela respectively, it doesn't really work out when you have the speed control. The Hyper Voice going to be able to hit that Tapu Fini, and then you have Incineroar just going to be able to Flare Blitz right off the gate.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough. I suppose you could make... Oh, Manectric's not Mega either, so you don't have an Intimidate option even to protect the Celesteela.
Gardevoir just going for the Protect, maybe not expecting to be able to KO the Celesteela, but doesn't even want to risk it. The Muddy Water going to hit the Incineroar, it looks like, but loss of the choice specs makes it so that it probably will be able to take the Water Bomb critical hit. Yeah, only taking about 50%. The Flare Blitz is going to be hitting that Celesteela. This is very important, but we did see in the previous game that it looked like Celesteela couldn't take the Flare Blitz, and we see that once again.
Yeah, so we'll have to see if the recoil maybe knocks it out, but it's unlikely.
No, I think if you activate Barry there, and you couldn't even trick it away this time. And Incineroar going up to a very comfortable, I would say roughly 60, maybe 70%.
Yeah, no, Incineroar has too much HP to get knocked out by Flare Blitz recoil.
And that's really unfortunate because Celesteela, if you can, we knew Jeremy's entire four pretty much from the get-go. He doesn't really have a solid win condition with the loss of Celesteela.
Yeah, it's going to be nigh on impossible to get rid of the Amoonguss unless you get the overheat exactly right.
Right.
And this Incineroar is going to be able to take another Muddy Water unless you double target it. And then at that point, you're just ignoring Gardevoir too much, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way that Tapu Fini can take the Hyper Voice is through Snarl, but you're still going to get enough chip damage and survival that it doesn't really matter, especially when you're just free to Trick Room instead.
I think the other interesting point was that Gardevoir did go for Protect last turn.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering about that. I think maybe just you kind of have to hope that, well, if I got a Muddy Water accuracy drop, I don't want the Celesteela this time, I'll get a Heavy Slam off.
Yeah, I think he was just being safe and not risking Gardevoir when it was unnecessary. His position was so good. didn't really need to create a situation, any opening for Jeremy at all, really. Manectric entering into Mega Form, intimidating the Incineroar a little bit, but that's not really the problem here so much as Gardevoir. The Volt Switch hits the Incineroar for solid damage. You're seeing that nature difference really showing off there. That was quite a bit more than Volt Switch has been doing all day. But Tapu Fini's in a very vulnerable position. Cresselia has to come in because it's the only remaining Pokemon, but it doesn't have any tools from the get-go to really stop that. The Scald does come out, but Incineroar wasn't really the problem. You'll happily take the Incineroar KO because you're getting a free, unweakened Hyper Voice in the future turns and a very safe Trick Room. Amoonguss can just come in anything, really.
Yeah, I think if there is a Snorlax, this is a great time for it to come in, too.
It is just the Amoonguss, and even though it can't really spore too much, its only target being the Cresselia due to the Misty Terrain, it doesn't need to attack. It just needs to support Gardevoir well enough to clean this game up.
Yeah, I think it might be able to. The Amoonguss also is really threatening for the Tapu Fini, and I think at this point you can just kind of Rage Powder and Hyper Voice until it goes away.
I mean, I don't know what he can really do. Cresselia is not a Pokemon really designed to come back. It's really just more to build a position and help you win, as opposed to be thrown into a position for you to win.
Yeah, so without the Snorlax, Jeremy's been sort of forced into bringing a lot of Pokemon that are sort of just support rather than like a bunch of offensive pressure.
Tapu Fini stealing the item from Amoonguss, but Amoonguss having got off a successful Spore on the Cresselia, making this even more difficult than usual. Stealing the Wiki Berry, but the Hyper Voice might do enough damage where that doesn't matter in the first place. It has not been snarled, and there is no light screen. Tapu Fini not being able to take it, so even though the berry was stolen, Amoonguss doesn't really care thanks to the Regenerator, and you're now in a position where all your Pokemon are going to outspeed Jeremy.
I think that was probably a roll there. If the Tapu Fini had survived the Hyper Voice, it gave a bit of a chance to Jeremy.
Right.
But again, he was just going to have so much trouble doing damage to the Gardevoir. He lost the Celesteela, and then he didn't bring the Snorlax, which maybe just there's a lot of things that Adrian can do to threaten that Snorlax, especially with the Incineroar.
Yeah.
But just there's a lot of this sort of defensive framework on Jeremy's side without much offense.
Yeah.
I think it was going to be really tough to manage to work that out, especially once he lost the Celesteela to the Flare Blitz. I think I'm not sure what Jeremy could have done there. It was going to have to be some really elaborate planning to work around this.
It's pretty difficult, especially considering that one of Jeremy's primary forms of offense is that Choice Specs Tapu Fini, and not a single time was it even able to keep its Choice Specs upon entering the field.
Yeah, some really good prediction from Adrian to always catch that with a knockoff, and then just sort of abusing the fact that Hyper Voice does a lot of damage to everything, and so it can always catch switches.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it looks like he's just trying to think of something to turn this around, but it's going to be, and Protect is something that you could try to burn out that Trick Room, create a situation where you can Snarl. Amoonguss going for the Sludge Bomb, you're just trying to ring up as much damage as possible, and you can't Spore anyway. You're pretty free to do so. Hyper Voice coming alongside that Sludge Bomb. Sound moves don't actually awaken Pokemon, so while it is funny to see Cresselia while asleep, being screamed at, not going to wake up.
I mean, I guess that works for any attack. Like, when you attack a Pokemon, somehow it just
it's not like people just, like, take hits in the sleep and they're just, like, comfortable with it. Usually those things wake you up.
I don't know. Amoonguss' sleep is really powerful.
Yeah.
Just, like, really want to take a nap.
It's quite psychotic.
I think if Cresselia can wake up this turn and get the light screen out, then maybe we have a chance that Manectric was doing a lot of damage. If it gets the overheat off and starts critting a lot of attacks and Cresselia ally switches properly, maybe if
you need a proper ally switch, because with Misty Terrain being gone and Manectric just having protected, you don't really have any sort of way. Oh, you don't even see him go for the ally switch. Manectric going to take a pretty nice nap as the singing should just continue forever. You do get the light screen, but I don't think even that is enough at this point to really stop Gardevoir.
If Manectric wakes up really quickly, but even then, we haven't even seen the last Pokemon. If it's Snorlax, there's going to be a lot
of... my! That had to be a critical hit. Even like that was insane. So now it's Cresselia against 3 Pokemon, and once again, Cresselia, not the type of Pokemon to really create comeback situations like this. It looks like Adrian should be advancing to the final round.
Yeah, so Hyper Voice is probably just sparing us a very long end game rather than changing the outcome of the match. There was that, there was a lot that Adrian could do to stop that no matter what, and there wasn't enough damage pressure. Even though the Manectric was more offensive, its move pool was still not set up for it to do a lot of damage.
That was just a pretty amusing turn, just helping handing no one, really reflecting on the loneliness that is Cresselia just being out there all by itself.
So I think it's all over now. Adrian will be advancing to the finals.
Yep.
I think it'll be really interesting to see if it's Gardevoir Mirror or just Gardevoir on one side.
I personally have to go with please don't be Gardevoir Mirror. It's a little more fun. But, you know, I'm pretty into screaming matches, having been from downtown San Francisco myself.
I did like just the sort of the defensive framework from Incineroar Mungus, again, just making it
Yeah.
really difficult to deal with Gardevoir. Because Gardevoir, even if it's not getting off full powered attacks all the time, if you've got a light screen up or like Snarl in the previous games, you can keep setting up Hyper Voice and you can keep doing damage with Gardevoir, and then you can even just trick Room to make way for Snarl.
Yeah, I mean, the core is just incredibly inconsistent. It's hard to break. Just do a very natural typing synergy. You have a ton of options in item removal, status, regeneration, attack or stat control. Basically, because you can remove their attack stats and weaken them. You would just have so much options normally. Amoonguss, a Pokemon very comfortable switching out multiple times thanks to that regenerator.
Yeah, and then Jeremy managed to get really far with his own really effective defensive framework, like the Manectric and the Cresselia and the Celesteela.
Yeah.
But then just, I suppose, Incineroar being able to break the steals and then Fairy going everywhere, like that Fire Fairy coverage, even if it's not always full power with the Intimidate and the Snarls, it still just manages to break through all these other defensive cores while you maintain your own defensive framework.
I mean, the Manectric cores have been pretty successful throughout the season so far, but this looks like the reason they're going to need to adapt. It looks like our remaining semifinalists are heading over to the arena, so to speak. So we'll be back just a second with Dewey and Hayden on the mic. See you soon.